the fourth time I've created this video because I keep getting interrupted by the announcements. So cross your fingers. I hope this works. We're going to talk about adding the why question in to develop your thesis statement just a little bit. The why question is usually not included in the prompt, but asking the why question after answering the other two questions from the prompt may help you reach a level of sophistication in your thinking and writing that would otherwise be hard to attain. So be careful though, because you do not want to add the why question and answer in unless you are already very comfortable with addressing the prompt questions that are already there. Because if you add the why in, it can make your paper worse if you don't do it right or if you're unclear. So be careful with this one. Make sure you're comfortable with the other questions from the prompt first before you attempt this one. So let's go ahead and talk about what the why question is. That's kind of weird, but what is the why question? Well, the why question asks why the subject you are writing about is significant. So in this case, the subject we're writing about with this prompt is Pi's character development. So it would ask the question, why is Pi's character development important or significant? So if we were to look at the questions that we would write if we were using the why question, we would see that the ones in red came from the prompt. How does Pi develop as a character in the scene, and what literary elements and techniques does Martel use to portray that change? Those came from the prompt. But adding the third why question can help us develop our thinking and our thesis statement. Why is this, or why is Pi's character development important or significant? So let's talk about what this is. As a reminder, this is the topic from the prompt, which again, in this case, is Pi's character change. Significant or important to whom or to what? We have to figure that out. But there are generally three things that you can think of or that you might be able to talk about in terms of significance. You can examine why this topic might be important to the rest of the story, or in other words, why Pi's character development might be important to the rest of the story. That's one thing. Or you might talk about why this topic might be important or significant in history. So, for example, why does Bernice's coming of age, why is that significant in history? Well, Bernice's bobbed hair and her coming of age reflects kind of the cultural shift that women were going through in the 1920s. So that's why her character development was important to history, because it paralleled what was going on in history. Also, why was the loss of innocence in the flowers significant? Well, because it reflected the cruel and harsh world that existed after Reconstruction and existed to some degree still in 1973 when the story was published. So again, that's why that whole loss of innocence in the flowers might be important in history. But in this case, there's nothing really important about Pi's development to history, so I'm not really going to try and answer that question with our prompt here. We might also consider why this topic is important or significant to the reader, who happens to be another human being. Again, we can look at, for example, in Just, the poem. Why was that important to the reader? Because oftentimes, human beings, all human beings, go through some sort of loss of innocence, whether that's gradual or sudden, like in the flowers. But we all kind of go through a loss of innocence at some point, and it often results in that sense of disillusionment that that poem portrayed. And so in that case, it's important to the reader because the reader is another human being who will experience something, that universal human experience as well. I don't think that there's anything super universal right here about Pi's character development, so I'm not going to try and answer this question, why is it significant to the reader? But I can go back to this question, and I can think about why his character development might be important to the rest of the story. And I think it's important to the rest of the story because in this scene where we watch Pi go from this weak, powerless character to this empowered, joyful, charismatic leader, we learn to root for him, we learn to like him. And in literary terms, what that means is that we learn to sympathize with him, which means we learn to identify with and root for and care for him as a character. And I think that's important because at this point, we're only 5 chapters in, we have 95 chapters left to go, and we know that Pi is our protagonist. So we really do want to sympathize with him or root for him, care for him, and read along and experience those adventures with him. So I think I could maybe add that idea in. Let's see how it works out.